Just feel very insecure.
Why?
I don't know, dude.
You don't talk about my Adam that way.
I just feel insecure. I'm sure it'll be fine.
I'm sure it'll be just fine.
Hello, everyone, and welcome
Welcome
to the
back.
big. My name's Adam, and I'm an actual dog catcher. I go around catching dogs for the city.
My name's James, and I've been releasing dogs like crazy.
Today, we have a special topic for you. Again, it could be in point of entry for your integral theory undertaking. This could be your first video. We're going to investigate how Ken Wilber's integral theory has changed over time in ways that may arguably be contradictory, so updates or revisions. This idea was spread and popularized by Ken Wilber. So this didn't start out as people criticizing Ken Wilber saying like, your books used to say this, but now they say this. It's coming from like intro and endnote material and Ken Wilber's own writings about his own work saying, I used to do it this way, now I do it more this way. So then people read that and they're like, oh, so you haven't had a consistent system this whole time. It keeps changing. You correct yourself when you're wrong. This is a kind of a really quick and dirty way to understand that. We're finding that as people go out and look up Ken Wilber, just what is that? What is that about? You know, what is the theory? What is integral theory? This arises as like a little bit of a pickle, conundrum. Okay, so Ken Wilber has 5 different systems that have changed over time. So it's a thing that isn't finished yet, or it's a thing that contradicts itself. That's, I think, what we're going to dive into today. We're going to look.
That's what we heard from y'all. Okay.
Oof.
Yeah, and that's science, baby. Sometimes it's not sexy, but he has an idea through experimentation and investigation. That idea shifts. It pivots to like, oh, here are different findings. Okay, maybe we need to adapt to that. To me, that makes it more legit than something that's been around as long as it has and it has been unwavering. That seems like an issue to me.
Like people are saying, well, doesn't like the original Ken Wilber like contradict the later Ken Wilber in this or that way? They usually don't have a specific point like that. Like they would not usually be able to tell you what the difference is.
What the contradiction is?
Yeah, right. So it's just kind of this impression that sort of Ken Wilber propagates himself more than anything as a way of, it's kind of a way of boasting that he's made a lot of progress to say
Right.
that, I've had to change this 5 different times. But in our world where certainty is so much higher a commodity than progress, it's like, well, wait, so you're saying that Pepsi was not good before it changed the recipe? Like, why'd you change the recipe if you had a perfect product?
Yeah, since it keeps contradicting itself. I don't trust Pepsi.
From late 70s to present day, what do you call it, half a century, there are what Wilber would call 5 phases. Wilber 1, Wilber 2, Wilber 3, Wilber 4, Wilber 5. As a person who just reads these books at the time that's sort of towards the end of that timeline, I'm not snapping them up when they come off the shelf. I'm pretty much just, oh, another Ken Wilber book. That's right. I'll read that. I'll check that out. I wouldn't say that I noticed the difference. It's not like you're reading a recent Ken Wilber book and you're like, wait a minute, I thought that in the second Ken Wilber book it said this. It's not that kind of thing where you're retconning older works. Or
You'd have to binge enough material for Wilbur 1 through Wilbur 5 in a short enough time frame to notice the shift. Is that what you're saying? Like it's a gentle
and probably
ebb
in
and flow
sequence too. Yeah. It's like whatever the difference is in the topic from there to here is actually what he's referring to with these changes, these phase changes. So it's really, I really find it to be a little disingenuous, and I think that's as good a reason as any for this video, but it's also, it's a pretty good intro to integral theory, and it's a good way to kind of think about how this theory comes to be and how it's kind of grown into what it is now. And that was the thing that I really learned as I was kind of having to suss out the differences, is that the main thing that changes about integral theory is the way that it considers itself, is like its own self-identity. Starting out, it was more like, how can Western psychology be true if Eastern mysticism is true.
Is also
So you have this guy who's fairly convinced, like, okay, Western psychology does things clearly, and Eastern mysticism does things. So if I am to assume the one, how can the other be true? It's kind of started out like that. Wilber 1 was this spectrum of consciousness suggesting that people exist on different levels. Now, when we say levels today, we're talking about like leveling up a lot. We're thinking in gamer terms, like I want to get to the next level. I'm at this level. But it's in the OG Wilber Phase 1, spectrum of consciousness, no boundary. Levels are more like there's a bucket with like oil and sand and various things in it, and the levels are just, they exist at that level. So he's not really thinking, we're going to start with our persona, and then we're going to work on our ego, and then we're going to work on psyche, and then we're going to work on consciousness. Although the model is similar to that, my four selves mini model, personality, ego, psyche, consciousness, he kind of lays it out on a spectrum like that. But it's not, the idea isn't as much like advancing from one to the next. It's just to realize that these levels
here they are.
coexist.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a human mind, psyche. These are the levels of it. And so different therapies, he's suggesting, like Western therapy deals with the lower levels predominantly, with growing us up, getting us out of trouble, getting us out of maladjusted, unhealthy mindsets. Whereas Eastern therapies, mysticism, spiritual practices, religious practices, this sort of work, it deals with what at the time would have been called lower levels because it's depth. But now we would call those higher levels. Doesn't really matter whether you know, height or depth in terms of how complicated they are, or in terms of how hidden they are, or how intangible they are. Might be more of a depth factor. But in any case, the Eastern and religious therapies deal with this whole other different part of the person. Their sort of existential yearning to be whole, as opposed to their just human limitations, their frustrations, their woes, their inadequacies. Wilber Phase 1, it's just sort of levels. It's just sort of levels. Without lines, without quadrants, without any of that. Hasn't really hashed out this idea of verticality or, well, in a way, you can work on each of the levels independently, but it's sort of a simultaneous work. It's not like finish the shadow work, and it still isn't, but this is just, again, it's like a matter of how it packages itself and considers itself more than anything. So an integrative approach that synthesizes mysticism and psychology and makes them reconcilable with one another. That's kind of all the original Ken Wilber Phase 1 integral theory is. What's James? Well, it's a body with a head.
It's a bunch of matter.
And then later you come back and say, well, it's got arms and legs too. Oh, what? I thought you said it was a body with a head. Well, yeah, it also has arms and legs. This is more what I see happening here. It's like, okay, we've just made this incredible progress by identifying levels and explaining to people. That's why you go to this medicine person and they say you're sick because you are attached to worldly things. And you go to this medicine person, and they're saying you're sick because there's a chemical imbalance and you have suffered through things that make it hard for you to feel normal under ordinary circumstances. And these guys are like, well, wait, which one of you is right? You know, it's kind of as simple as that. It's a pretty pragmatic matter, even though it gets to the heart of the human issue or the existential issue, or, you know, it gets to a really central, you would call spiritual significance, religious significance place. It's not considering itself this theory of everything yet. It's not considering itself this like ultimate philosophy of reality yet. In particular, it just hasn't really found that identity yet. And then so as Wilber basically puts out this theory, Phase 1, it's considered kind of revolutionary and groundbreaking among people who are interested in that topic, reconciling Western cognitive understanding therapy, psychological therapy, with Eastern woo-woo spiritual archetypes, you know, putting that all together. So it's very Jungian. It's very much aligned with like Jung's work, but it doesn't really go much beyond that pursuit. Just trying to figure out the nature of consciousness. And so now you have a system. Now we have levels. We have the kind of the way he does that four selves model. There's kind of about 6 or 7 like level layers there to look at, and then it's to suggest, this type of therapy or practice deals with this level. This type deals with this. Over time, you'll probably find yourself rising through those levels as a basic affinity, or as a basic like, this is where Adam's maturity is at. He's the centauric level. He's focused on the mind-body split. He's focused on understanding, how consciousness can exist independent of like bodily awareness, severing some of those really rooted attachments that we hold as suppositions in the way that we conceptualize philosophy. Having put that model out now, he starts to realize that he's drawn a map or a model of mystical ideas, the perennial wisdom, just this sort of thing where every time you go into the deepest, darkest secrets, the arcane secrets of a sect of people that say these are the most important things to realize about reality, this is the most valuable stuff, it tends to be of this nature that you're free from being a person, free from being a self, and this is just the case before anything happens, but we're fooled into identifying as this ego self of a person, and we get lost in that identity, and it creates this incredible suffering because we're so attached to the only thing we know, the only thing we have, and we know that it's going to be taken away. We're not going to give it up gladly either. The cards are already dealt and the game's already over, but in the meantime, this is, suffering. This is one way of conceptualizing. It's the suffering that is existence, that it's a rental situation and it's not your decision. The perennial wisdom is to point out that just all over the world, these are people who do not agree with each other. They didn't get together and make a conspiracy of this. It's just kind of people start to realize that there's this process whereby you can have a series of very real personal discoveries, not of a knowledge or something you could like write down and set on a horseback. It's like, here, once you know this message, you'll get it. But it's more like the love that you would have for your child. It's like that's something you just get. It's not words. It's not, no matter how much I describe it to you, it doesn't make a difference. So this thing, enlightenment, it's not about, the way that you conceptualize it or present it or educate others on it or even maybe understand it yourself. It's sort of this elusive mystery. But when a person has caught the tail feathers of it, when a person is somewhat engaged with that mystery, there's this recognition between them. And you go, oh, so you're touching on this secret thing that we're all kind of after, this sort of spiritual thing. You're kind of touching on it. And just to point out that that's the same in all these different cultures and all these different contexts. These guys are calling themselves atheists and doing it. These people are calling themselves this religion or that religion and doing it. These guys are just a bunch of weirdos. They're doing it. So if everyone's doing that, it's like we're now Wilbur 1, recognizing that this is sort of the nature of spirituality. This is sort of a philosophy of what spirituality is and how it applies to the human experience universally. So the first thing that comes up as a criticism, though, is he starts to realize that the path that we recommend, the mystic recommends, is usually a regressive path. It's usually to go back to history, get rid of all that newfangled, get rid of TikTok, put all your DVDs away, don't bother going to the bank and the Super Bowl and socializing. It's like, just take everything back, because we know that in a cave with a fire, it is possible to have this recognition of the bottomlessness of things. It's possible. So that's the only way we know how to do it. So this is like, it's like sort of regressive. And, Freud's like very, Sigmund Freud, the father of psychology in Western psychology, is kind of looking at this problem. People are spiritual, even though that doesn't I'm a man of science. I'm just trying to figure out how the psyche works. So how do I factor in spirituality to that? Freud would more or less dismiss spiritual state experiences as sort of a return to the womb. It's sort of an infantile, just re-immersing yourself, returning to a state of babiness. And that's kind of been the going model for a long time, just fresh eyes.
How do you think his massive cocaine addiction led to regression to like being in the womb?
I think it helped, if anything.
I mean, dismissing like magic and mysticism, everything regresses to your like sexual yearning for your mother. It seems odd. But the amount of cocaine he was doing on a daily basis, which was perfectly legal at the time. He's not like some degenerate, but he was prescribing himself quite a bit of cocaine. I don't get it. Like with cocaine, I feel like you'd be out in the universe and not back inside. So it's kind of interesting how he inverted instead of extroverted on this very extroverted drug.
Yeah, I guess it probably helped him to, feel really creative and inspired as he's kind of trying to detective out the nature of why we do how we end up convinced of things that are so clearly kooky,
Well,
just trying to figure that out. It's like,
Right.
well, you do think a lot about your mother in a sexual way, and you do want to strangle everyone, so maybe there's some relation there. And sure enough, this is where you start like kind of getting into the fibers of it. And yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, Freud can be kind of dismissed for a lot of like any pioneer, there was a little bit of silliness to what he was doing, but definitely invented the way that we do this,
don't get me wrong here. I do believe what he was doing was groundbreaking, was revolutionary. Finding out that he had a massive cocaine addiction, it seemed weird to me that he went, in his line of thinking, he went the way he went. I mean, cocaine's a hell of a drug.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, who knows what the style was of using it back then, or like the purity, like.
Oh yeah, 1,000% pure and straight up the nose.
Yeah, yeah, with different kind of different cultural mood about it. I don't know.
It was medicine.
Freud created this precedent, though, that we've hardly gotten out of, which is that, okay, we're making progress here on mental illness, like something to do with like talking to people, sharing things about ourselves, and investigating connections between behaviors and experiences and the way we think and feel and do. Something about that is bearing fruit, and now we kind of have this science of the mind. We can help people with their mind. We can help people to grow up. We can help people to not have as serious of problems. So that's promising, and we tend to throw out now what used to be psychology, which is like, well, if you train your mind in the ways of spirit and follow God's path, you'll be healthy and you'll live a long time and you'll be wise. Like we have science now where we can repeatedly ask people questions and see how those change over time statistically.
And that's the delineation between Eastern sort of mysticism type mental health, and Western scientific mental health. Like that, there it is.
One of those lines in the sand you can draw. Yeah, it's definitely with like Freud and the way we understand the mind now. And of course, Wilber integral is always both. Like do both. Like Freud is right and Freud is wrong.
Nobody's wrong here. Right. Nobody's saying they're right, but also no one's wrong here.
So not only on the individual level, it's sort of a regression to infantilism or childishness, right? I mean, you think about a psychic state, it's kind of like being childish. It's like you're really creative, you're really fascinated with things, you're really scared of things, you're really owning your emotions, you're unable to hold things back. It's childish.
You've relinquished the constructs that you've formed yourself in your mind, and you're once again open to new ideas or looking at things with your own fresh eyes.
Exactly.
An infantile view of, if this is what I've been told it is it actually that? Let's look at it ourselves.
Yeah. And then to go even further than just childish is to go to straight up infancy, which is like I no longer have this idea that I'm a person.
Even a thing.
I don't have this idea that time's happening anymore. So this is the now, So this is the romantic idea, is that culturally, in a collective level, we're returning to some lost or forgotten notion, some Eden of the past that we've fallen away from, or new ways of thinking have displaced. The Cartesian paradigm has blotted out our old the way of thinking that used to be more whole or holistically complete. Supposedly, right? This is the romantic position collectively, but then individually as well, that we're regressing culturally and individually, regressing to childish and infant states in the case of spiritual practice. It's like, okay, so that's kind of what Freud set us up with, and Jung, to kind of turn that on its head, was sort of making the opposite point, that like in the perennial wisdom, in these ancient teachings or esoteric teachings or mystery teachings, spiritual practices, there's actually the ingredients for a higher psychology. So it's funny that, phase one Wilber is Jungian, it's romantic because it's Jungian, because it believes spirituality is return to infancy in the past. And you could make the argument that that's not Jung's point either. So it's, but that's
I think there's
what
a
Ken
lot of
Wilber
arguments to be made here.
This is what Ken Wilber's leaving behind, though, with phase two, is romanticism. So now we're saying it's absolutely not, you're not just like hitting yourself with a sock full of grape nuts and becoming so dumb that you now appreciate the holistic nature of the universe. You now appreciate that you're God.
Although some of the dumbest people I've met in life, I'm not going to name names, but some of the people who are the least smart that I've ever met are some of the happiest people I've also ever met.
Yeah, they all have
Weird.
Buddha nature.
It's not weird, but it's you just don't know how much things suck if you're not thinking about things.
Yeah, and like Craig, my friend Craig says, the key to life is to be a dog or a bear.
Yeah, exactly.
You definitely don't want to be a person. Just
Live in the moment.
Dogs are all excited. They're totally excited about everything.
Put social fear away. Like there is a good, healthy physical fear that needs to happen. But so put social fear away, slap a smile on your face, and go out there having a good time.
Damn it!
Stop thinking about it so much.
Phase one to phase two. The difference. Phase one didn't really consider it like, it's kind of like a falling back to, or a dissolving into, as opposed to a growing up into, or a waking up into, as opposed to moving forward into the future. It's kind of a subtle point, and it kind of doesn't matter which way you see it. It doesn't really affect your ability to do Tantra or your ability to practice Scientology, whether you consider the activity that you're doing to be a regression or a progression. Because clearly, the ego has got to be out of the picture. Whether we're going to before ego or we're going to after ego is not. It's just kind of an academic point, really.
We've said it on this channel multiple times before, and I'm going to say it again. In the beginning, you're happy because you don't know any better, and in the end, you're happy because you've let everything else go. Both ends, you don't care. Stop caring so much. And
so the romantic, so this would be that primary pre-trans fallacy, would be to say they're exactly the same. There's no difference between that before and then after. Well, you're kind of right, but the difference is that one is before and one is after. It's like
they are different.
They're different in a way, yeah. There's certainly something going on that's similar, between the fused child consciousness that has no ego yet because it hasn't invented one, to someone who's fully capable of producing ego, realizing that they're constructing that, seeing how this operates. Now it's like, okay, wow.
That takes some work.
Trans-egoic. You're seeing the ego from a sort of pseudo-egoic position, like ego sees itself, or just the psyche is aware of its manifestation of ego. Very different than I'm basically falling into ego because it's providing survival advantages to me. This is why I say it's like you're kind of just adding legs to a body. It's not really changing anything to consider this an upward trans movement, trans egoic or trans rational. But it changes a lot in terms of your attitude about it and the culture of it and how you conceptualize and philosophize about these concepts. If you're considering it a regression or a backtracking or an escape, it has a lot of different moral implications to suggest, well, we shouldn't have done industrial society in the first place, as opposed to the cure to the problems we've created in industrial society is into enlightenment, into self-knowledge, into greater awareness, not to just destroy all the credit companies and destroy currency and destroy government. Now we're just back in the mud already, so we're good. We're regressed. Now everything's back to how it should be. That's sort of the eco-terrorist position. Right? So it really changes a lot philosophically and morally to go to Wilber Phase 2, but in terms of how you would understand this material, it doesn't change a thing. It's still a variety of therapies dealing with different levels of the self. It's just that now we're calling it advancing forward into angel-like status as opposed to regressing back to pre-atom pre-atom psychology. So we're still just levels, and we now have this sort of burgeoning pre-trans fallacy. The more you're kind of understanding integral theory and appreciating these subtleties of it, the more pre-trans becomes a problem. People are equating the birth of civilization with the crest, the great achievement of civilization, as opposed to like, this is clearly a greater achievement that I can look up the answer to any question we've ever answered in any way, automatically get that within 2 seconds. That is superior in a certain way of thinking to riding brass chariots pulled by horses. There is, in a sense, just in technological innovation, there's like a superiority that changes the sort of nature of the game that we're playing here in a way that it now becomes important for us to realize that the way up is through. It's not an escape from this society. It's not a backtracking. It's not a overturning revolution. It's a progression forward that we've always been intending as individuals and as a society. We've always been intending to be enlightened and compassionate and eco-friendly. That's never not been the goal of being life. And we've never accomplished it. We've never successfully, to accomplish that is almost inconceivable still for us to, what if we actually had, we had the planet on lockdown, it was actually safe? Unimaginable. We're just so far from that ever, occurring. It's unimaginable still.
Because of the personal egos. There's always someone in charge, elected, self-elected dictator, birthright leader, whatever it is. There's always one person making a bunch of decisions. Sometimes for the best of themselves, sometimes for the best of the majority, sometimes for the best of the planet. Less likely that, but we, as a society, as a pack of wild humans, we like there to be a leader. It makes things easier. But that leader's motives aren't always feel good on the whole.
Hard to find individuals that are really crunching time, seriously just committed to the greatest compassion for all living creatures, the most benevolent outcome for all people. It's like it's a thing. They're
typically not motivated by money, reward, fame, or clout. So they're not the leader.
Yeah, right.
That's the right person, but they don't want to be. They're pretty happy with just not doing that.
I don't want it.
Yeah.
Wilber Phase 2 is basically Wilber Phase 1, just with this kind of slight nickel and diming. Is kind of growing into its own identity. We're not just saying that all these different approaches to spirituality and philosophy have these similarities and just pointing that out. Now we're kind of saying this is a new system that incorporates all those. So it's kind of forming its own identity by being anti-romantic. That's a new idea that Integral's adding to this conversation. Phase 1 is kind of just clarifying the conversation. What is enlightenment? And how does that relate to mental health and mental illness? Phase 2, it's now off, and it's starting its own rabbit hole, where it's like, okay, now you have to kind of keep up with this because we've pretty much just rejected the entire history of thought on this topic by saying that enlightenment is the future. Enlightenment is what we're moving toward on the individual and collective. It's not a recaptured Atlantis sort of deal, perhaps. So now we get into phase 3, where we add lines, essentially. So this is Integral Psychology is the main phase 3 book. Integral Psychology essentially just takes every psychologist that's like known of that looked at stages of consciousness, like in any way, shape, or form, and just kind of laying them all next to each other and looking for this core pattern that connects them all, which is how we arrive at the spiral dynamics or altitudes, 12 levels of consciousness or 9 levels of consciousness. These are universalized because we already had levels. We had these basic levels. A person's got persona, ego. It's got kind of biosocial self-understanding. It's got psychic level of understanding. It's got subtle, causal, non-dual levels of understanding. So now we kind of have that rough schema, but we're trying to really figure out, okay, how could we all agree that really is? Like, how many levels should we say there are? And so it's laying all these different researchers, is from like gurus to like just academic psychologists to literary, psychoanalysts, people who kind of write books about the theory about it. So taking all these schools and kind of smashing them all together, we now arrive at this like stage system, but in that smashing, that you can't just smash. It's not a legal move. So again, it's like we're not.
It is if the ref's been knocked out by a chair. I've got like 3 minutes before the ref wakes up with no injury or accident, and then he starts tagging me out because I've got a steel chair in the ring. You're telling me that's not legal, brother?
That's how and that's how the whole thing is gone, right? So we're now at this point of recognizing, like, okay, it's probably not romanticism. It's probably not in the past. So the referee's unconscious, like nobody's working on this problem. And already Wilber's like, well, but this isn't right either. Because what you find is there's a person that has that higher level understanding, but they don't act it out. Or there's like a person who does act it out, but they don't seem to understand what they're doing. So there's like, this is where lines kind of need to come into the picture. You can't really, even though we kind of did, you can't really just identify a person's character as levels in isolation. It's not enough information, and there's no pattern of development you can really find if you're just considering one thing that will translate across all people and all times. So now we need lines. It's like, if we are to focus on one specific attribute of a person, then we can make conclusions about how people develop over time. Like how you play guitar. That's a very predictable course. You don't, you're not doing like two-handed tapping on day one, and then way later, you learn how to play 2 notes at once. There's a progression, just like mathematics or anything. There's things that have to be in place before further things can develop. And you really should work on those more, get those fundamentals more, but you're always eager to move forward with things.
You can learn 2 chords and then start tapping those 2 chords. But if anyone else brings in a 3rd chord, you're lost. You got to go back, do work. In one, it feels like here's all the levels, but there's very gray in between, and you're all the levels at once. Now that we have this progression of lines, you can skip, you can speed, you can slow through, but they all are existing and they all deserve a level of work.
Yeah. Or even just awareness. Yeah. Work or just even just getting.
Become aware. Guitar's a thing. And then what do you want to do with it?
Or just like if I'm a music guy, how good of shape do I need to be in? So I'm aware of my like body as a line of development. But I probably don't need to be. I could be like pretty out of shape and still play music okay. There's a point where it would be a problem, but it doesn't need to be my top concern unless I'm like, in pop music and I'm actually going to be on video. Then I need to be pretty much my physical appearance is the most important thing about the act.
Well, I mean, even just like being able to move your arm up and down to strum, like
That's pretty important.
that's a physicality. It seems minute to most, but some people that's not possible.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe that's your shtick is that you're the person who plays in spite of some handicap that you have. It's a pretty common thing for me.
This is not the point.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, the feat of playing drums in a band is in terms of strictly like body stuff, it's not that challenging. It's pretty intermediate. Mm-hmm. Like, and drumming's like the most strenuous, right? But it's not up there with like Olympic level. It's not like athleticism, but yeah, you need a certain amount.
There's something going on there.
Certain requisite amount. These are kind of extreme examples of lines if we're talking about like my physical versus my mental ability at something. Would be one example of lines, but my sense of who I am could be at a high stage, but my sense of who other people are might be at a pretty low stage, and that would kind of make me this tyrannical character because I have so much like awareness of myself and of things that relate to me, but I have very little awareness of how I should kind of evaluate others. So it's like I could be a narcissist in this case. I could just be like kind of, well, I'm the most important person, so everyone else, and I don't have to like pay attention to them or care what they think or feel because all I know for sure is that I'm right about everything. And so that actually makes sense so that's like low moral development, high development of some other line, cognitive development, or low social development, low communication skills coupled with like really high comprehension in another. And so this is actually a pretty big problem in spirituality itself because matters of authority, like this isn't a thing that you prove with papers and tests and statistics. It kind of, if you are to believe mysticism, there's a certain element of trust and just kind of like what did Yoda do to prove that he was the master? Well,
he gave advice that turned out correct. Well,
a ghost came and confirmed his legitimacy.
Yeah, we could get down into that universe and how altitudes and integral theory go to Star Wars quite a bit. But he was a pretty badass before in the prequels, like in the before times, before the 1970s original ones came out. He was a pretty good badass. His teaching philosophy was not to give you the answer ever. The answer is not what you need. What you need is the ability to find the answer yourself.
So in real life, faced with Yoda, these are not storytelling characters. These are real people with flaws and limitations, and it might be a lot easier to make that mistake of like, is Yoda just some schlub, just some weird little goblin creature that's tricking me? Or is he actually the Jedi Master who has these kind of strange, he talks funny and he's not a species I recognize?
English wasn't his first language.
Yeah. So, and that's going to be the case with your spiritual master too.
Probably.
WILBER'S coming along and saying, okay, we're phase 3, like, so in the past, it was like, we just sort of had this system, lineage system oftentimes, or hierarchy of the clergy. Mm-hmm. In either case, it's sort of this artificial way of saying who's at the top, who gets credit for enlightenment or spiritual creaminess. Obi-Wan tells you that Yoda's the master, and how do I know that's true? I have to either believe Obi-Wan or not. So it's level 4, it's dogma. But how would I make that determination on my own? I would have to myself be a Jedi Master to know for sure.
To discredit.
So we go... classically, it was just like, well, you don't question the master. If you have a problem, then leave. You're not wanted. We're not going to train you if you don't believe in the authenticity of the master. The master is the master. They can do everything better than you. Don't question it. And that kind of works as a model for teaching. Kind of works, but if the Yoda happens to be a psychopath or a tyrannical or sexually abusive, any of those things,
whatever it may be,
Yoda, Touch me, you must first before you can learn how to stand on your
I
head.
think the movie Your Highness touched on that. They go to the master, and basically for any answer you want, you got to.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. And unfortunately, that's how it plays out a lot in real life, is to get the secret, even with like a legit person of spiritual ability. You're dealing with someone who has highly developed spiritual line of development. Could be anywhere on other lines, including morality, including interpersonal. And,
Right.
the way to pay them might be a pretty big sacrifice on your part. It might be a sort of unfair outcome itself.
This reminds me of something that you talked to me about maybe a year ago, possibly more, but on your journey, Adam's journey, you met this fellow in a park meditating, which already you fell in love with because you like meditating in public. And you talked to him, and he was amazing, and he was this Jedi master, and you wanted to follow him, but his interpersonal communication skills were so flawed that you couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, this would definitely be like lines. Yeah, he was advanced in this line that I value really highly, but man, I invited him to come live in my home. He was homeless.
Even so far as to offer
Yeah.
your home.
I was serious, yeah. But he was like a petulant teenager. Other than knowing all this stuff, he was very like bossy and arrogant and rebellious, and it was just silly. And I'm like, oh my god, like then after I kind of like got to know him a little better, I'm just like, wow, okay, so definitely this held up the lines concept. Like, okay, I can't deny from what I know that this guy has some sort of realization that is pretty powerful, and that he was able to convey things to me that really helped me out with that. At the same time, I can't deny that he's a childish prick.
It's not on
He's
tap.
just
It's not his programming is
adult.
different than yours. Yeah,
It's
you
like a
can't.
high school kid I'm dealing with. He's like 50, 40.
Right.
And
there's
you do see that a lot with the Pratyeka Buddhas, the alternative people who go off and kind of find it on their own. They don't learn the kind of supplemental material, the lifestyle stuff, the compassion stuff, the healthy psychology stuff. Because this guy was also very, he was a little bit disturbed. He had a little bit of mental perturbation
Paranoia
going on.
and
Yeah,
manic.
right. Yeah, inability to kind of cope with things that would be more ordinary for me, even though he can cope with things that I can't cope with. So
He can see the entire universe, but a barking dog is too much.
yeah,
I just wanted to bring him up, not to discredit this guy in any way. He definitely has value to add, but the lines thing and a little bit of the dogma part of we have to measure one thing. You can't be on all of them at the same level all at once. I mean, I won't speak in absolutes. You could, but it doesn't really exist. It's so improbable that everything that you do is at such a level that's almost impossible. You do have to have some self-care in there. And this person was an example of very, very high on the lines in the ability to perceive and understand ego from a third person perspective, but he's not a trained trainer. He can't tell you how to do it. So much so stinted in that it actually repelled someone who really wanted to know about it.
Right,
and I feel like
yeah.
Adam as an example is someone who would put up with more than the average person to attain such things, and you hit your limit.
To understand the dignity that we're affording with the integral theory thing, I can appreciate this about him. I don't think he's just some dirtball. It's a complicated thing. There's lines here, and one of them is kind of beneath my expectations, and one of them's way above my expectations. And so those have to both be held in the balance of how I would judge whether this person's valuable to me. And hopefully that goes out to you and at home, or you and as you pursue spiritual knowledge and reading books and interacting with people, that you really, realize even if a person has this powerful cognitive understanding or spiritual understanding, or they're good at a thing, it's really kind of aside the point of whether they're going to be harmful to you, or whether
that's not for you.
Trust them, or whether you could collaborate with them. Yeah, for you, exactly. Whether it's something that you can engage with. really important thing to bring to the discussion of spirituality, because we've given it that dignity. We've said, okay, I as a scientist, as a skeptical person, am allowing this the benefit of the doubt, the possibility of existence. So now we have to strip it away a little bit of the glory that it gives to itself. So now we can ask, if I accept enlightenment as real, is it as supreme as it claims to be? Is it mastery as it claims to be? Is it just a weird talent that people can have? Is it even a talent? Is it an accident? We can actually define these things more clearly when we are not just exaggerating.
If you're an enlightened person, you have no interest in media. Well, you have kind of. You'd still watch a movie. You still exist in modern times, unless you're one of these very skewed scale people who would rather be a hermit. And then again, one person's enlightenment is not for you, but that's also not the person who's going to be able to aid you in your growth by any means. You have to be plugged in to an extent to meet on the same level to receive advice, guidance, and information. If you're so far off, like this guy's just a loony, well, to you.
Yeah, and that makes me think too of a sort of a little more gray area of it, is that we often are most intrigued by these sort of spiritualities that come from really exotic and foreign, like, oh, I'm going to go travel to South America and study with a shaman. That'll be so exotic and different and really pull me out of my headspace. But then you go return to your headspace, because that's where your home is. You go back to your own country, you go back to your own values. And so that exotic, weird, different thing is not who you are. It's a thing that you are now celebrating.
Romanticized.
Yeah, now it's romanticized. It's put on a pedestal. It's imagined. I was so spiritual when I was in China.
Or
not in China now.
I was just thinking about this the other day. My wife and I were watching a horror movie, and all exorcisms happen in Latin. And you're like, oh, wow, it's like so powerful, because I don't really understand what they're saying. And Latin kind of sounds really cool. But I did a little test on the internet where I just put a prayer or, exorcism chant into a translator. And then when it comes back to you in English, you're like, oh, that's pretty dumb. If they had said that in English, it wouldn't be so magic anymore.
Because even like Latin scholars probably talk in Latin at like a baby level. It's like, go die, demon, be away from us. Go away, God makes you go away, bad.
You stink and you're bad. leave this person alone. Like that's
funny.
That's not so magic anymore.
Actual Latin is when people talk in Latin, they just actually sound really stupid if you actually speak Latin.
Oh, no, I wasn't saying that the prayer that I uploaded was dumb. The prayer was the same either way, but the magic was gone. The romanticy was gone, because in a horror movie, it's badass to like cast out a demon with Latin. If they did that in English, it wouldn't be cool. And this was sparked by watching some travel show, and the cameraman almost invaded someone's privacy who was praying. This is in a small Mexican village, because it sounds really cool. They're praying in Spanish, and so there's this magic to it. This person's just trying to like do their thing. They're saying the same thing that you would pray in English. It just seems cooler. There's more magic to it. The Eastern mysticism of a guru is so much more exotic and romantic, because you don't quite understand just the language itself. If it was all translated into English, it just doesn't slap like it would. AI has taken Adolf Hitler's voice and image and taken his speeches and made it into English, and it's just the rantings of a spoiled boy. Like it's just this like butthurt little kid that's saying Germany's the best and F everybody else. And people were cheering because they had just lost a world war, and they felt shame. But it took all of that, even romanticizing it sounds bad, but it took that fear level down, because you understand every word he's saying now, and it's not magic anymore. He's not this. I mean, he was an evil tyrant. I'm not upplaying Hitler by any means. Translated grammatically correct is like we're picked on too much, and we are the best. And, we need to do something about it. In German, it sounds scary. In English, it sounds like you're just a spoiled bastard. Hindsight's 2020.
Listen to those AI Hitler speeches, because you always are curious, like, well, why
What did he
people find that
actually
so?
say?
Yeah, right. How are people like so excited about it? And yeah, it just sounds like the same kind of here in English.
This, yeah, the same dictator speech that anyone would make. Like, we're all the
Yeah, and
best.
the whole like,
F everybody else.
the thing that really made it like dragonish, like when you put that in your own language, it's like they gotta be stopped and get them out of
Yeah.
here.
You know what the
sounds
real
lame.
problem is?
Yeah,
Like,
they took my money.
right. We're being made fun of. It's that magic is gone. It's not so scary. Well, I mean, it's
They're all
terrifying.
little babies, little babies.
The hindsight is that is absolutely terrifying. But that could be plugged into anything. The Latin exorcism, the Mexican woman praying.
Yeah.
Stop romanticizing things so much.
Let
People are
that
people.
Indian guru get away with murder, because they're just quirky, they're just different. Oh, no, they're professional. That's what we call.
Yeah.
Pursuing enlightenment in the exotic and the things that are not out of your culture. We put spirituality far away, whether it's in the past or in other cultures, and I think a big part of this movement is to recognize it in the most boring everyday stuff. The actual lives that we actually have. We don't know, but you don't need to associate the notions of spirituality with the notions of simplicity. Like Yoda, he's a little hermit. With
yeah.
a pot the cauldron that he makes stew in. It's like he also, if you go back, he's also the guy in the city.
He wasn't always a hermit. He just got tired of people.
Yeah.
Knows he's about to die. You are just as capable at achieving enlightenment here in the U.S. if you're there, wherever you are listening to this, just as capable there as if you spend thousands of dollars and travel to someone who's incapable of teaching you what they already know. We all have different addictions and wants and lusts in life. So do they. It's different, but it's also the same. You have just the same capability. And forget about all that romanticizing, because you're fine. You're just as good as they are.
Yeah, the point here really is that we have allowed in these mystic types. We've allowed in the guru concept or the idea of enlightenment. So now we really have to be careful with the filtration and gating of that, because we're not woo-woo. This isn't a woo-woo thing. This is like could this be real? Could enlightenment be real? Could there be science of enlightenment?
Without the magic.
Yeah. So even though that sort of stuff might seem helpful or be helpful for your own understanding or whatever, for your own practice, we have to hold this to those sorts of scruples, like the Western science scruples. So yeah, we're going to be very vicious about calling stuff baloney here in Integral, about calling out fake expressions of spirituality, mysticism. That's why it's so hard to, no matter which side of this you're on, whether you're trying to expose fraud or celebrate genuine mysticism, it's an extremely delicate game, because it seems like people who are pro-mysticism are going to try to elevate everything mystical even though it's fake. And then so there's all these charlatans just, there's people promoting me because they want to believe in something. Yeah, I had 27 past lives. I can channel them for you now. So now, okay, get them on the bandwagon.
Come live on my compound and just give me all your money. That's all you've got to do, and you can be right there with me.
And on the other hand, people with genuine experiences being lumped in with those people who have genuine spiritual experiences. They're not trying to make a buck. This is their actual character. I had realizations about the nature of existence. I want to share them with people. It's like, in order to celebrate
and they want the opposite. Don't come to where I live, and I don't want anything of yours. Just, I'm pretty good.
Yeah. In order to elevate or even acknowledge the existence of enlightenment for this kind of Western style of thinking, it comes with a huge pushback of like, okay, but obviously it's still the case that most of this is fake.
America does not care for baloney.
That's what a lot of the pushback is, starting from that phase one. Phase two kind of reintroduces, okay, it's not a childish regression thing. It's not romantic. It's a future movement thing. It's a leveling up thing. Phase 3 still pushing that pre-trans fallacy concept, that it looks different in the expressions of children from the expressions of people who are like growing into their psyche, and the addition of lines to say that you could be highly developed in one way but not in another way, and that's still not inconsistent with the way we're understanding things here. And that's discrediting every guru who thinks they're a perfected being. They're not. Mm-hmm. That's not how Integral understands this. And it's giving credit to that guru, giving back the credit. Oh, you do have a really advanced spiritual line. You do have a really advanced state ability. So it takes away, it giveth and it taketh away. Some dignity gained and some lost. For every side, it's a lot of compromises being made in this kind of science versus religion debate, science versus spirituality debate. Lots of, if you are going to go with the one, you must also accept this particular part of the other, for
everybody poops.
Entire grasp of reality. Just in the abstract, phase 4 is probably the only one that I actually notice. Like reading the books, phase 4 is kind of a clear movement, maybe, could be argued. Phase 4 is when it really becomes the theory of everything, where it becomes this sort of philosophical system or operating system where when I say things like, the 5 modules are the nature of reality, this is kind of the phase 4. So, I mean, we haven't changed much about the model. We're just now identifying its scale more. It's like, it's not just psychology and it's not just philosophy and psychology, but it's actually kind of like every field. It's kind of like this applies to systems theory and the sciences and mathematics and literary criticism. So it's like, okay, wow, this is actually like a really fundamental core pattern of the universe. This is phase 4. So the main noticeable thing is quadrants. You got that grid picture, with the crosshairs and all the levels growing up in all 4 quadrants at once, growing in the I, the we, the it, and the its.
On the chart. You're not an ever-growing circle. Things are moving at different rates. The chart shows it like, wait a second, you wouldn't be here and here and here and here at the same time. No, you wouldn't be. Adam had to teach me how to read this chart. Like, oh, okay. If each one is independently growing in its own way, and it would be kind of weird if you were at the same it would be rare if you were at the same level on all of them all at the same time. That chart takes a little bit of explaining.
Well, it's a map of perspectives too. So it's like you say, you're on the chart. Well, what you am I talking about now? It's like the I you or the we you that you understand or we understand together. Quadrants through quadrants.
It is a pneumatic powered nail gun. It is not the house.
So
it's a tool.
In order for me to be showing up at upper left eye orange meme must exist in conceptual reality. So it has to be an extant thing in order for me to express it or receive it. It has to be out there. But that doesn't mean that I'm a member of an orange meme culture or society. It just means that those properties exist in nature. Those are out there somehow, some way. And it can't not be that way. Like unless I invented orange meme all by myself and then I tear it down and somebody else invents it every time. It's a completely novel emergence every time. Like, no, it's a pattern. Once that's been unlocked, once it's been kind of revealed, like now everyone can kind of do it. So it has a cultural existence. It has a social existence. It has an ontological existence. It has a personal existence. You can't not have one of the quadrants at all. But also, the way that it's expressing in a particular quadrant might be pretty minimal or pretty, sneaky. If you're in magenta meme culture society and you are expressing, orange meme, it's like, where did you get that orange meme?
You're going to be the enemy of the state.
Well, they won't understand. So, yeah, again, from their perspective, you're definitely not orange meme because that's not in their lexicon. They couldn't talk about it. So at least in the lower left, you can't be orange beam in that case. But where did you get it? You had to get it somewhere, unless you invented it, which maybe you are that person.
At some point in history, it was.
So
Some
in order
point
for you
there
to
was
invent
one chicken egg out there.
in order to invent it, it has to be the nature of the universe that you could slide into that you could, discover that or the quadrants co-emerge, they tetra-emerge, they like a thing exists in all four at once, but the way that it appears from any particular perspective, it might be invisible in other quadrants. It might not really show up there. But you'll never see like alone just a spider without there being other spiders in existence that you could call, oh, that thing is like those other things that look like that and have similar characteristics. There aren't things like that are only in the individual and not the collective. But there's not endless examples of things like it. Quadrants really open it up into this system of understanding anything and suggest, that these level dynamics that we've been talking about, phase 1, 2, and 3, we're mostly applying to individuals and culture, but we're starting now to suggest that these are core patterns of nature, just the way that nature arises. The development of technology and society that we've been tracking through history and technology, like studying paradigms and the way that technologies form and the way social systems form, that those also, the right-hand quadrant stuff, follows this same map of levels. So that's actually a pretty new addition to Wilber 4. It's kind of suggested prior, but it's only at phase 4 where we're really outright saying like Marxian evolution of social classes or economic systems is the same structural reality as my growing up from being a tyrannical little brat to trying to fit in to being a winner at the game to criticizing the game, first tier rising, that is actually going on in technology and in politics as well.
Phase 4 is where I fell in love with this.
Yeah, levels occur at in every kind of facet of what we know. And I think that, me too, I think that's what makes this really unique, is that it's kind of a full system of philosophy. It's much more remarkable in that sense than just being a theory of psychology or like a mystical theory.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where integral theory really takes off into being its own thing. And this is where it starts calling itself like Aqal, the Aqal model, all quadrants, all levels, or all quadrants, all levels, all lines, all types, all states, still just Aqal.
IA plus.
This is going hand in hand with spiral dynamics a lot and wanting to buddy up with kind of more businessy management, think tank, academic sort of projects, as opposed to just working on culture, like new age culture and individual practices. Now it's kind of has this ambition of being like a full-on system that could be used as like a social system or a philosophical system or an actual like basis for, understanding reality or doing the life jam.
So at stage 4 is when I fell in love with this whole thing, because it's applicable to any sort of process structure, be it society, program, like Adam was saying. It opens it up to be applied to so many other things, because now there are more fine instruments within this theory. Before each of these stages that he goes through, it's not really contradicting. He's adapting and making a finer point to measure, a finer measuring point. You can be really an enlightened person who has a lot to share but incapable of sharing it. Well, now we can go in and look at each one of the attributes of this person or this system or this program or whatever, and apply these much finer instruments to it, which sounds like you don't know what you're talking about. Well, every one of these stages, the world gets, the whole theory, the whole project gets larger. More tests required.
In this way of understanding it too, the Aqal, the whole system thing, it's like it really impresses upon you how much it bleeds out in just like, you're watching TV, you're having a business meeting, you're talking with your family. It's like, we're talking about levels still. We're all, this is all about levels still. This is everything I do.
Whether they know it
has
or
to do with
not.
levels, communication between levels, across levels, within levels. It becomes kind of an all-consuming way of seeing things for lack of having another comparable one, a competitor.
I implement it as often as I can, because if you can spot a level and quadrant that someone's coming from, you can meet them there and everything becomes easier.
Phase 4 to phase 5 is maybe one of the trickier ones to pick apart, especially at a beginner level, which is kind of, this is what we're doing today. I hope that it's clear up to now that like it's pretty much the same thing and we're just adding mechanics each time. I mean, there's almost, I don't even really get the idea of it like contradicting in retrospect. I think that's kind of more just Ken Wilber's point. If I were to kind of really encapsulate the difference between 4 and 5, phase 4 and phase 5, it's kind of a difference between level 7 and level 8, or the teal integral developer and the turquoise holistic centaur. This is kind of my characterization. Teal level integral developer, you've just discovered stages or levels, and you're so excited about them, and you'd want to get yourself up to the highest. You want culture to get up there. You see this as this kind of panacea that the higher we can develop people, the more we can save the world and enlighten everyone and wake up and grow up and fix everything. So 7 is so excited about that. But then it tries to do that work and it sees kind of, oh, this is the situation. And so then you get to like level 8, which is a lot more gummy. You're a lot more like stuck in the process of actually carrying out these things. And, we're recognizing these core patterns of nature more and more as being so difficult to change and so difficult to work with and to embody yourself. So integral post-metaphysics. So metaphysics is like, this is how reality is behind the scenes. This is what generates the apparent. So post-metaphysics is to say, we're not ever going to have that answer. We'll never know the man behind the curtain. What we can say is that there's levels of understanding what the man behind the curtain is. And that's like the best you can do with metaphysics, to say that, well, people used to think the man behind the curtain was a literal man with an actual beard, with actual strings that they're pulling on. And then that was kind of understood to be sort of a metaphor for the mechanics of nature. It's just levels of metaphysics. So post-metaphysics is kind of levels of metaphysics. Integral methodological pluralism. So this is more in that gummy stage 8 thing, where instead of trying to grow everyone up, raise eros every situation, you're more taking things where they lie and saying, does the amber meme approach to cognition work in this application, in this specific cross? Would it be of value to change the level that this is operating at, or is it operating just fine at that level? The methodological pluralism kind of opens up this interesting possibility, like, let's say that people need religion, but the religion, so on the one hand, people have religion, so they must need it for something, must be doing something, they like it, but also people are very critical of religion. There's also that thrust out there. So we have there's two types of people in the world. There's anti-religious people and pro-religious people, and how can we work with them? So the integral methodological pluralism would be like, take everything about those two views that don't conflict with each other. Okay, so far so good. Everything that they don't disagree about, we can keep. They can just say that's not breaking anything yet. And now it's very clear what we need to agree on, what we need to come to terms with are the things that we disagree about. There is a literal guy pulling strings versus that's a metaphor to the way the universe works. That's the part that we have to work on. So all these like side issues or identity issues are no longer important. And
there's there's an infinity of other guys too.
Yeah.
It's 100%. Not just like not anti-religious, but non-religious, religious. It's also all non-religious v all other types of non-religious, religious v all other religions. There's just so much
Within and
criticism.
without.
Yeah.
And religious scientists and scientific religiousists and yeah,
There's an infinite number of guys pulling strings, or there isn't.
the great war between the two factions of science is in South Park, like.
Yes.
So this is kind of what I started doing with my non-membership religion of consciousness. It's like, okay, I want to pray and have community and meditate and believe and have faith, but I don't want anything else. I don't want any of the stuff I don't like about religion, shutting people out, believing myself to be superior, thinking I have all the answers. So I don't want that. So I came up with this plan. It's sort of integral methodological pluralism. I'm going to make up a religion that satisfies what I like about religion and keeps that, but that has to necessarily sacrifice everything that is no longer acceptable by like contemporary integral theory standards. So I end up with this kind of bare bones structure for all of these things, science, sensitivity, egoic narcissism. All of these kind of have these skeletal structures, like how much of a narcissist, how much of a red meme, impulsive, selfish person must I be? Mm-hmm. There is some amount that you must be. Instead of just saying that's bad, do it less. It's junk food, do it less. It's like, how much junk food must I eat? What's the best amount of junk food to eat? And usually it's not zero.
But it's nothing's ever zero.
Yeah.
I think probably the most narcissistic thing that you could do is expect that you have the ability to bring other people to your level.
Yeah, that's tough.
That's so narcissistic. They'll get there. If you can accept that they'll get there and just meet them where they're at, you'll be a lot happier person.
Yeah. And just understanding that they're feeling the same way about you. They're wanting you to get up to their level too.
Right. Right.
Trying to cut
narcissism, baby.
Bring you down, maybe. However it's seen.
Well, let's say just laterally that your A and their B, both columns are the same height. Like you need to be an A. Well, you need to be a B. Well, let's forget about both of that and just accept we're both columns. Then we'll have a great time.
That one's a little bit loose, but phase 5, we definitely abandon the spiral dynamics for altitudes, and the main thing is probably reconceptualizing all of these modes, all of these like quadrants and levels and lines as perspectives. These are perspectives, so like a level is a perspective. Whereas before it didn't really define them as perspectives as much as more as like perceptions, like a thing that exists. Now we're kind of just saying I am inventing this into being by perceiving it. It's a little bit philosophically looser. It gives you a little bit more wiggle room. Because it doesn't, just like all these changes, like it doesn't really matter whether you consider amber meme to orange meme physically existing in nature. Like, what does that even mean? But somehow people were at amber, they started to discover orange. So does it physically exist in nature? No, I guess. So we're just calling it a perspective. It's just a perspective. And it also gets into really high grain. So we have like the Wilber-Combs lattice saying like, what is amber meme non-dual like? What is green meme non-dual state structure was like? What is red meme psychic structure? So every state at every stage is like being defined. And also every quadrant, interior and exterior. So like, what does an external perspective of a first-hand perspective look like? How does James, in second person, how does James think about how Adam thinks about himself?
Right.
Second person view of a first person view. Now that we have these kind of like mathematically lined out, with phase 5, we're actually kind of getting into applications. So it gets really, really nuts and bolts and grainy if that's the task you're taking on. Like it still has this universal, can appeal to everything. Now that it's all kind of laid out and systematized, you can get into this really fine-grained stuff, looking at every quadrant from every other quadrant, from interior and exterior, pinpointing exactly what set of line, quadrant, level is under the microscope right now.
The specific thing you're looking at, yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I would kind of put the phase 5. It's probably the loosest defined phase, and that's where we're at today. We've been
That's
there for a
because
long time.
we won't be until we're at phase 6 that phase 5's locked in. That's when. So it'll
That's what it
be
seems
loose.
like. It does seem that way. And I think that's kind of why I had a lot of difficulty myself determining these differences and working through the research that other people have done, Wilbur and others, on what the real differences are between them. I feel like we captured them pretty well here. There's a lot of subtlety to it, but that's sort of the origin of integral up to present day and how it's kind of transformed into major slices, making the argument that it's not really self-contradictory. It's just sort of, it's still being invented actively. You know, it's still moving
Right.
towards identifying what it is and what it can do. And each of these steps is just, whether it's agreeable or not, it's a massive step forward in thought, in systemic thought, in the way that kind of popular systemic thought, like the way that you conceptualize theory itself. You know, these are all pretty significant steps forward. I would argue forward, but at least steps. I think it's kind of undeniable that something has been accomplished here with the 5 phases of integral theory. You're just as welcome today to only accept the conclusions of phase 1, that there is a such thing as enlightenment that exists. You're fine accepting only up to phase 3. I just think people have all these different aspects of themselves that develop through all these different levels, and that's kind of the nature of the human psyche, or the nature of reality. So you can accept any of these phases or not, and it doesn't change anything at all. But also, they're not really incompatible. Like, oh, you're Wilbur 3, well, I'm Wilbur 5. I don't agree with you.
Yeah, they're each in addition to, not meaning above. You just have a different tool set.
Definitely the biggest difference as it actually presents itself is the way that the terminology we use. Like,
oh God, don't get me
Wilbur
started.
1, I would be like, oh, this is to do with psyche level, the vision, logic, centaur, or whatever. Wilbur 3, it would very clearly be those spiral dynamics. It'd be second tier. It'd be teal, turquoise beam. And now it would just not be spiral dynamic. Well, I would have said yellow, turquoise, but now it would be altitude.
Teddy Duchamp's boy and the coral memes. Remember coral meme?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, it's weird. It got replaced by Indigo, but that was the official level
That was
9
tier 3,
of Spiral Dynamics.
Was
They were
initiate
tier 3
at coral, yeah.
Coral. Yeah,
Gorgeous.
I've seen a couple different renditions of where it goes.
Well, my camera died.
Thanks everybody for watching. Still love you. Still having a great time out here. Still saying, yeah! And then I take my other one and I go, yeah! I do.
Yeah!
Hopefully, we hope that this has shed a little light on Ken Wilber's system over time, how integral theory has changed over time, whether that helps you to decide for yourself if it's all a bunch of self-contradictory nonsense, or if it's never been consistent.
Pseudoscience hullabaloo.
Yeah, that's fine. We just want to provide you with the information.
Make your own decisions.
These are the 5 phases of Wilber, and we can't use the word phase anymore now. We're using up all those. All y'all better, we really appreciate you out there while we're making all kinds of different videos right now and having a great time. We're having some awesome guests on the show. See the one about Wonderful, my favorite band in the world. Got to do an interview with them. It was indeed wonderful. Lots of Adam and James podcasts, lots of Adam solo shows talking about feelings and drugs and all, and integral theory mostly. Thank you for coming out today. We'll see you next year.
God damn it! Like, subscribe.
So don't forget. Don't forget.
Everybody, shut up. Go on.
Go ahead and take that little like button down there and stick it underneath your pillow. And someday in the future, it'll become a subscribe button that you can also push. Just pull it out under your pillow. Push that subscribe button. You'll never miss an update from your boys. The Unthink Me boys.
Nailed it.
Yeah. I know.
I'm going to hit that old D trail.
It looks that way. All right. Well, we'll see you, old chum.
Love you.
Yeah. Love you. Okay. Bye, everyone.